calling. How are you, man?
I'm doing fine, thanks, Jeff, except for a bit of a spring cold. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Nashville, Tennessee.
Is that your home now?
That's where I live. Yeah, I've been here for, I moved here in 1985. So
No
yeah,
kidding.
yep.
I always thought you were a beach
Colorado
bum.
guy?
or
What? A beach bum?
yeah, was a
Well, you know,
yeah.
well, we started in California, and then we migrated to Colorado in the early 70s, and then we kind of scattered from there. We live all over the country now, so. Yeah.
Well, it's great to talk to you because I got to tell you, when May the Circle Be Unbroken came out, that was my introduction to so many great American musicians, including yourself.
Thanks.
But I mean,
Thanks, man.
I wouldn't have known who Doc Watson was. I wouldn't have known Flat and Scruggs except for Beverly Hillbillies if it wasn't for you guys. And that was a special thing.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. That's become a real point of pride for us over the years. I mean, you know, as we were selfishly, when we were in the thick of it, because we were all in our early 20s when we made that record, we were just all about we're getting to hang out and play music with these people that we've idolized since we were teenagers, you know. So it was a great experience for us. And then later, you know, we've heard a lot of comments like the one you just made about that being a primer for, you know, American roots music for a lot of folks. And those artists in particularly like Doc, like Doc Watson and Vassar Clements and Earl
Vassar,
Scruggs, Jimmy Martin.
Oh, and then all of a sudden I'm picking up the latest Jerry Garcia, and he's got Vassar and Pete Rowan on it. You know?
Yeah. I think we beat him to the punch on that one.
You beat him, yeah.
Old and in the Way.
That was the band.
It was a great band, and I was really, you know, I'm grateful that I got to spend a lot of time with Vassar over the years and played on a couple of his solo records as well. So, yeah, we miss him. He was one of the great.
You got a hot fiddle player back in the band now, though. I see.
Oh yeah. We do. We as you know, John McEwen exited the band a few months ago, and we've got Ross Holmes, who, if you're not familiar with Ross's work, has played with Mumford and Sons, Warren Haynes band, most recently with Bruce Hornsby's band, Bruce Hornsby and the Noisemaker.
Right.
Ross has been a noisemaker the last few years. There's a great writer, singer-songwriter from Texas named Ryan Bingham that Ross plays with now and again as well. But we're happy to have him out there with us, man. He'll be jumping on the Dirt Band bus this year, and, you know, hopefully a lot more to come, you know.
And your son as well.
My son as well. Yeah, well, the other thing about Ross, by the way, just if you don't know, great mandolin player as well. So, super talented, great guy, and he's my son's neighbor, which is kind of how this whole thing came about. I met Ross a couple of years ago at a family get-together at Jamie's house, and he came over, and we started picking and singing and laughing, and maybe, you know, might have hoisted a few in the process. And he and I and Jamie had talked about maybe making some music together. Well, when John left the band, it kind of opened this door, and there you go. We're all, you know, super happy, including John. You know, John's got a really neat band he's out there touring with called the String Wizards. And
I've heard of them, yeah.
All the guys in his band are old friends of mine, and I'm really I'm happy for him as well.
Well, these guys are almost half your age.
Oh, Jamie and Ross. Yeah, well, Ross is less than I'm more than twice his age.
Okay.
Jamie, let's see. No, I'm not double Jamie's age, but, you know, Jamie's in his early 40s. Ross is in his mid 30s. So,
is it possible that this generation of the Dirt Band is doing exactly what you did back in the early 70s with doing like a father and sons thing?
Like Earl Scruggs at the Earl Scruggs Review. Well, that's a great way to put it.
You're handing it off.
Yeah,
passing
I
the
like
torch.
That. It's good. It's good with me, man. I like that. I like that concept. I will tell you, you know, John did a record with his boys, Nathan and Jonathan, a few years ago, and I was so much admired and envied that, you know. Jamie's been playing with a great country singer named Gary Allen the last several years.
Great, yeah.
And before that, Jamie played with the Mavericks and Raul Malo on a solo project as well. But and then he and his cousin Jonathan did a record called Hanna back in
right,
which was a great record. Unfortunately, they got chewed up in a record company merger, as happens, unfortunately. But yeah, and but the idea of playing music we've always played together.
Yeah.
He came out and sat in with our band about 15 years ago. We had some dates, and one of the guys had just left the group, and we were taking a break, thinking we'll just sit around for a while and and sort of collect our thoughts and regroup and get back out there. And some dates came in, and Bob Carpenter, our keyboard player, called me and he said, "Why don't we do these shows?" And I said, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Let's just call Jamie." So Jamie came out, hopped on the bus, and it was me and Bob and Jimmy Fadden and Jamie. We did like 10 shows like that.
Oh,
then
wow.
Jamie went off and played with the Mavericks after that. So, but things work out in their own way. The whole meant to be thing is really cool, and it's such a blast for me as a dad and as a fan of his music. The guy is really uber. Both those guys are uber talented.
He can play guitar better than Dad?
He's a way better guitar player. I think. Hold on, let me kill that phone. He's a way better guitar player than Dad. I always like to say that he might have got his taste and tone from me.
Yeah.
But which I'll take partial. I'll take partial credit for that. But I think I've been an influence there. But his chops are ridiculous. Oh, he's really good. And he's a killer singer too. I mean, that's kind of why he got the job singing with Raul Malo and the Mavericks and with Gary Allan as well. He's a ridiculously talented singer, great writer.
And he can play like Jerry Douglas.
Well, he doesn't play like Jerry Douglas because Jerry's a dobro player. But,
okay.
But he I always think his playing reminds me of Mark Knopfler's playing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean he's got that kind of touch. He's super good. He's a fine drummer as well. He sat in one of the times he sat in with us. He went back on the drum kit, and Jimmy came out front and played harp, and Jamie went back there and played. He's got a good feel for the tubs as well. So it's great. And we got our buddy Jim Photoglow, who I don't know if you're familiar with Jim's work, but Jim is a great songwriter and has played in a bunch of. He had an artist deal back in the '80s. He had a couple of hits on his own in the pop world, but also he moved to Nashville from LA and started writing songs down here and wrote this song called Fishing in the Dark that we do.
Well, that's a big one for you.
That's significant for us, yeah. But we've been friends since before then. And Jim played in Dan Fogelberg's band for quite a while, played bass with Dan and played with Carole King. So, and he had a great little kind of a sort of a funny take on a combination of like it was a band called Run C&W with it was soul music the way God intended it. They used to say soul music the way God intended it, bluegrass style, and it was done bluegrass style. So they would do things like sweet soul music and but it was Bernie Ledden from the Eagles played banjo, and Jim on bass, and Vince Melamed on washboard, and Russell Smith, who was a lead singer in a great band called the Amazing Rhythmists.
Wow, that was a great band. It really was.
I love that band. Yeah, so Jim's got great cred, and he's an even better hang. He's just a great guy, super good guy. So Jim came out and started playing bass with us for the 50th anniversary run that we finished up last year.
Now it's the 52nd anniversary run.
Yeah, I'm going to quit counting for a while, I think. I'll only count when we get to the zeros, I think. This is kind of day one for me. I'm really happy about that, It's a good reboot. So
hey, let me go back, if you don't mind, the 60s.
Sure.
Because you're even older than me. I'm in my mid-60s now, and so many people of your American musicians, your generation, started out in that jug band folk period.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's where you guys started.
Grateful Dead as well.
Absolutely. And
The Beatles.
Well, that was the English jug.
Yes, skiffle, right?
Skiffle.
They called it skiffle. Yeah, and they was the Terry Men, I think, is what they called it, or something.
The Quarrymen.
The Quarrymen. That's it. Yeah.
So, and you know, you go in the history books and you read about all these guys, and whether it's the Hillmans and the McGinns, and or guys like Jerry, they everything changed when they saw the Beatles.
Yeah.
On Ed. and then they all grew the hair out and picked up Rickenbackers and tried to become rock stars, and many of them did.
Right.
You guys didn't, did you?
Well, you know, we were in the thick of that. I mean, at least the L.A. version of it, because we were watching our friends like Chris Hillman go from a bluegrass band to playing in the Byrds. You know, he went from playing mandolin in a band called I think it was the Scottsdale Squirrel Barkers. I'll have to do me a favor and name check that if you would.
I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah, but Chris did that, and you know, and then again there he was singing Mr. Tambourine Man with Roger McGuinn and Gene Clark, and that was really inspiring. But as a high school kid, me and my buddy Bruce Kunkel, who was in the first version of our band, Bruce and I were really drawn to the folk stuff. As much as we loved early rock and roll, it was like initially the commercial folk boom with the Kingston Trio and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Joan Baez. I remember my older brother brought a Joan Baez record home, and I was looking. It was on Vanguard Records, and I was looking at the liner sleeve, and they used to do advertisements for their other artists on the label. And I saw a picture of Doc Watson, and I saw a picture of the Greenbrier Boys, and I saw a picture of Mississippi John Hurt.
Because they were on Vanguard.
That's how it all kind of, you know, that the folk process, you know. So when we were, you know, we did our little jug band in high school, and we got to know a couple of guys that were really talented singer-songwriters, which is unusual. Actually, my little brother, David, was the first guy I ever knew that wrote songs. But in there also was a guy named Steve Noonan that I met when I was, I think it was 16, that had a couple of really good songs. He wrote "Buy for Me the Rain," which is the first single that our band ever had. Yeah. But he introduced me to his friend Jackson, who was Jackson Brown. He says, "You got to meet this kid. He's 15 and he's a great songwriter." And I'm like, I was 16, so I was like, older guy, right? I said, "Dang, he is a great songwriter." So a couple of years later, Jackson ends up when the Dirt Band started. Jackson, we all played at the same little folk club in the city of Orange, California, which is just south of Long Beach, where we all grew up. And we were all hanging out there, Steve Noonan and Jackson, and a great writer named Tim Buckley as well. And so we were all like the little. There was Jennifer Warnes, who's an amazing singer. Jennifer had a folk duo with a guy named Doug Grau. Doug and Jennifer. So these are the people that were around us in this little tiny part of Orange County, California, and we did a couple of, we sat in on a couple of open mic shows with our jug band, and Jackson said, "Man, that looks like fun. Can I be in your band?" And we were like, "Yeah, here's a kazoo." He played washtub bass and guitar and sang, and it was great fun for a few months. And then we played some shows. We opened for the Love and Spoonful and the Sir Douglas Quintet, and kicked around the clubs in Southern California for a while, down in the southern part of the beach towns mostly. And then Jackson struck out on his own to do the singer-songwriter thing, and we knew about this guy John McEwen, and we got together and played with him for one afternoon, and he liked our band and we liked his playing, and that was that.
But you still managed to resist that pop urge.
Yep. Well, until we got signed to our record deal, and what happened there, and it always kind of just sort of ticked us off a bit. But we loved the jug band music, and we got signed to this deal because people were lining up around the block to see us play at these clubs. Right. And so Liberty Records signed us, but as soon as we got in the studio, they were like, well, this jug band music, we can't get this on the radio, you know. And, of course, you know, they were playing the Love and Spoonful on the radio,
sure.
and they were playing, you know, Mungo Jerry in the Summertime, which is really a jug band record.
Yeah.
Lazing on a Sunny Afternoon by the Kinks. There's a lot of examples of
Skiffle.
yeah, exactly. And so, you know, we went, okay, whatever. They said, we want to kind of recast you on the record at least as a sort of a folk rock band, because that was happening with the Mamas and the Papas and the Byrds, of course, and some other groups, the Turtles in L.A. and Love and Spoonful in New York. So we were like, okay, well, who writes songs? Well, Steve Noonan. So we found this song that Steve had written with another great writer named Greg Copeland called Buy For Me the Rain. And we cut this kind of jangly record. Yeah, no washboard on that record.
No washboard, yeah.
And
sound like the Byrds, they told you.
No, yeah, and it became a top 40 hit on the charts. So here we were, a bunch of teenagers driving around L.A. We'd moved up to Hollywood from Long Beach, and that song is being played on the radio like every 10 minutes. It was great, and we were like, top of the world, ma, you know. we got a hit. It's number one. It's easy. First thing we ever put out, number one, all over California, up and down the West Coast, and in East Coast as well. You know, struggle a little more in the middle of the country, but still, you know, we didn't care. We lived in L.A.
Yeah.
So that was that, and we didn't have another hit till Mr. Bojangles 6 years later, you know. Which
was a return to what you started out doing.
4 years later, yeah.
But that was in a way.
Well, I don't know if I can make this short enough, but let me try
to I got time.
So the band starts in '66. In '67, we do our first record for Liberty. And again, we're really frustrated because we want to play jug band music on these records, and they would sort of throw us a bone, you know, like, okay, go ahead and cut that old timey song. And we didn't like our producer; we butted heads with him. So we made 4 records with them, and by the end of 1968, Bruce Kunkel had already quit, being replaced by a great singer and multi-instrumentalist named Chris Darrow.
Yeah.
And Chris joined the fold, and he and I started writing songs together. Then he said, then Sweetheart of the Rodeo by the Byrds had just come out. And Chris was like, you know, we could do something like that. And we made a little attempt inside of that dirt band lineup to play that kind of music, and it wasn't a great fit. And also we were just kind of worn out. We'd come to the end of the line with, you know, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with business stuff, and there was just, we all got kind of exhausted with the whole process, you know, really disillusioned with the record business. So we threw in the towel. At the end of '68, we just stopped.
Whoa.
And Chris and I immediately started a band called the Corvettes, which was an ironic name for a country rock band because that was...
It's surf rock.
Chris and our drummer was a guy named John Ware. John Ware became Emmylou Harris's hot band drummer for like 20 years. He was a great drummer. Yeah. And a great bass player, the late John London, and who had actually grown up with Michael Nesmith and played with Michael Martin Murphy and a bunch of other guys, but he was great. So the 4 of us got a record deal, and
as the Corvettes.
As the Corvettes, yeah. It was John and Chris, who were both like art students, thought, tongue in cheek, what's the least country rock name that we can come up with? So Corvettes it was, which is kind of cool actually in retrospect. So we got signed to Dot Records. Or maybe it was Paramount. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. Anyways, our producer was Michael Nesmith.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, which was great because, you know, Michael's super talented.
Sure.
And he was kind of like, I think the Monkees were kind of coming close to the end of their line as well.
It was their head phase, I guess.
It was right at the head phase, right? But he had written this great song called "Listen to the Band."
That is a great song.
Really great. and he liked our band, so he said, let me produce you. So we ended up cutting 4 sides with him, and I think we released one of them. We released a single to radio, and it didn't really make any noise, and we're like, living on food stamps at that point. So we thought, well, we need a job. and just then, Linda Ronstadt called, and she said, hey, I've just, the Stone Ponies had just broken up, and I'm doing this solo thing, and I really like the way you guys play. She came to see us play some gig at the Whiskey or something in L.A., and she said, I need a band. I like you guys. And I'd known Linda. We've been friends since 67, I think.
Yeah.
And we're like, geez, that's an offer you don't refuse. So we played, we toured all over the States with Linda. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. If you look at the Eagles, like family tree, here's the funny part of it. When I got back together, actually John McEwen and I, in June I think it was, or maybe July of 1969, we ran into each other at a Poco gig at a club called the Golden Bear in Huntington Beach. And we looked at each other and said, we could do this. We should be doing this. Let's get the band back together. But prior to that, so I told the guys I was gonna go back with the Dirt Band, and Chris wanted to stay with Linda, as did John and John, and they got Bernie Ledden. Bernie Ledden took my place. And so the Corvettes with Linda Ronstadt was Bernie, Chris, John, and John. Then slowly but surely, then John and John left to go play with Michael Nesmith in the First National Band.
Great band.
Yeah, great band. So
wow.
So now it's Chris and Bernie and a couple other guys, and Chris wanted to do a solo record. So Bernie ended up essentially, playing, eventually with Don and Glenn and Randy Meisner. And the 4 of them sort of took the Corvette slot and became the Eagles. So I kind of feel like I was almost in the Eagles. I'm kidding. We were all, it's a joke, but we were all like hanging out. And those guys were my pals, J.D. Souther and Glenn Frey. I knew long before Glenn and Don. Don Henley was the only one of those 3 guys I didn't know. Because I knew Randy from Poco and from when he played with Rick Nelson as well, great singer and bass player, and Glenn I knew because of J.D. Souther, Long Branch Penny Whistle, the band they had, and then and of course Bernie had actually played on Dirt Band records back in '67, '68.
I thought so. I was before he had that period with the burritos and. Right.
In fact, Bernie paid. He paid me a really nice compliment last year. He said, I feel like I appreciate the fact that you left Linda's band, and it kind of pushed me into the position where I had to become a Telecaster player, because he was a banjo player and acoustic guitarist at that point. And he said that got me the gig with the Burritos, and then of course the Eagles. So, that was a really sweet thing for him to say.
That is nice.
A lot, thank you, Bernie.
But if you hadn't have left, we'd still be listening to Sonny Davis Jr.'s version of Mr. Tambourine Man.
Oh, Mr. Bojangles, I mean.
Well, Mr. Mr. Bojangles.
Well, yeah.
Which is pretty horrible when you think about it.
Well, when John and I got the band back together with Jimmy Fadden and Les Thompson, who were holdovers from the original band. And then we found Jimmy Ibbotson in the middle of the summer of '69. And, he was a guy that we really just wanted a singing drummer, because I was really a fan of Levon Helms and also George Grantham, who played drums and sang with Poco. So a friend of us, a mutual friend of ours, said, I know this guy, Jimmy Ibbotson. He's great. Great drummer. He's a great singer. And so we met him. Played drums, jammed for a while. The band all went home, and then Ibby and I sat around for a while and just played acoustic guitars and sang Everly Brothers songs for about 12 hours after that. Buddy Holly, Eddie Cochran, and it was like
it's the way to get the harmonies down.
Oh man, it was like he was that we were brothers, you know, right from the jump. So then I come to find out that he's this really good guitar player and a really good bass player, and he played a little piano, a little clarinet, a little accordion, pretty much a little of everything, you know. So that was a real score, getting Ibby in the band. You know, and then with me and Les went from mandolin to bass, and John with his vast array of stuff that he did, and then Fadden at one point, me and Jimmy Fadden and Jimmy Ibbotson all played lead guitar and drums in the same set. So if you came to see us, it was like, you know, musical chairs. We would, you know, get up and give me that guitar.
Polka was a little bit like that for a while too.
I don't remember. I don't remember them switching off on drums.
Not on drums, no. But the band used to. So.
Oh yeah. But one of the things I remembered about, and we were huge fans of Poco, by the way. I'm still big. Richie is one of my pals. He's great.
Wow.
And Rusty we know Rusty really well still. One of the things that had a huge impact on us, though, was seeing the band live, because they were this mystery group, you know, because they never identified who was singing lead, and their voices were so interchangeable that, I mean, of course, now I know it's easy for me to pick out who's who, right? But initially, especially in the first couple of records, it's like, well, who's doing that? Then we went to see them right after the Brown album came out.
That was a wonderful album.
Well, I mean, it's like in my top 3 albums maybe of all time.
You know they're from around these parts.
Hamilton, I do. Yeah.
Hamilton, Ontario.
Yeah, I was going to get there. There was one Yank in there, you know. The Arkansas boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went to see them play in the middle of, was it King Harvest? All of a sudden, Richard Manuel's playing drums, Rag Mama Rag, and Richard Manuel's playing drums, and it's like, played really great. He played a lot like Levon, you know. And then we're going, it's that guy. It's the drummer that's singing. It's the bass player. It's Rick. It's Richard, you know. And Jimmy Ibbotson and I did a lot of that, by the way. There's a whole lot of handoffs that happened mid-song in our sort of record history together. So that was a huge influence. I mean, Old Rockin' Chair, their band Old Rockin' Chair had that accordion and mandolin on it.
Garth used to step down from the keyboard and play the accordion,
And Levon played mando, and that was a strong influence on the arrangement of Mr. Bojangles. When we found that record, when we found that tune, which was another story unto itself.
But that's how you found it, though. It was on record. It wasn't like you were buddies with Jerry Jeff or anything like that.
Not at all. No. In fact, it wasn't even on record. It was on the radio. I heard a snippet of that song. I was driving home from a rehearsal one night, heard a snippet of Bojangles. I didn't know it was FM radio late night. They didn't back announce it, so I heard this song, though, that just blew me away about this old guy and his dog and his beautiful
Thank God it wasn't Sammy Davis Jr.
Well, you know, that was just a whole other take.
Yeah.
More of the Cabaret Vegas kind of take, you know. But I hear Jerry Jeff singing it, you know, but I didn't know who this guy was. And I came into rehearsal the next day and said something about I heard this great tune, but it was about this old guy and his dog, and Jimmy Ibbotson jumps out of his chair and says, "I know the song." And he runs out to his car and opens the trunk of his old Dodge Dart, and under the spare tire he had a 45 RPM record of Jerry Jeff's.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep. And we
I didn't even know it got released at 45. His version.
Well, Jerry Jeff's was a single. It just didn't make much noise. It was good, beautiful, you know. And
is Bromberg on that?
You know, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I know there are versions that he is on it, and
including his own, which is beautiful.
Yeah, Dave's is really good. We're pals with David too. He's a great guy. Anyway, so we cut the song, and you know, it was in the midst of, we had a couple of great Michael Nesmith songs on that album, Uncle Charlie, that had some of Shelley's Blues, and a song called Propinquity. And Jimmy Ibbotson knew this young songwriter named Kenny Loggins. was kind of looking for a break, and we ended up cutting 4 of Kenny's songs on that record. Randy Newman tune, Living Without You. I wrote a song called The Cure that was actually a holdover from the Corvettes that we never released. And we did some bluegrass, did a great old Ralph Stanley instrumental called Clinch Mountain Backstep. Randy and Rag, Earl Scruggs instrumental. Some blues. It was I love that record. That was one of my favorite albums we've ever made. The only thing I think that's different, is that songwriting hadn't quite developed in our band at that point. But I'm very proud of that album. I think it's got a great feel.
But you selected the right songs, so that's almost as important.
We still do. I mean, we still consider that part of the process. Writing is something we all love to do, and we've all had a bit of luck with that.
Who pushed Bojangles as the single?
It happened organically. I've come to realize, by the way, that's the best way for things to happen.
People just started playing it on FM radio off the album, or? Yep,
they were doing a little station down in Shreveport, Louisiana, was doing like a smash or trash thing, where they playing records like, Battle of the Bands late one night, and they played Bojangles off the album. And the phones started lighting up. People were calling in going, I want to hear that again. I want to hear it again. So these folks started calling the regional promotion man for Liberty Records.
Wow.
They in turn called L.A. and they said, we should pull the single that's out there, which was Some of Shelley's Blues.
Yeah.
And it was kind of struggling. And let's put out Bojangles. So they did. And a real slow burn. I think it was on the charts for 35 weeks. Went top 10. And
stayed there for a while.
Stayed there for a while. And, I got to say, I'm so proud because it's such a classic song. I'm so proud to be, a lot of people, maybe arguably most people know our version of that song because it was a big hit.
Well,
and to be associated with that tune. And we met Jerry Jeff after the fact, which is great.
And you made him some money.
We made him some money, and even though we screwed up a couple lyrics in the tune because we learned the song off a scratchy record, and it was kind of funky. Anyway, it all worked out. I'm really grateful. But we never thought that this 4-minute waltz about an old guy and a dog was going to be a hit.
Yeah.
And things worked out. There we go. Elbow on the pulse of America. That's
from there you were able to summon up the courage to go meet your idols.
Yep.
And that was, I mean, as you say, there was a lot of other people, whether it was Graham Parsons, whether it was the Burritos or Poco, all those bands in your neighborhood. They're all doing what you guys were doing as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But the thing you guys did that as we started this conversation off, you went back to the originators and the
folk process again, right?
Yeah, and it had been done in blues. I'm thinking of
it had been done in blues. Yes,
with Bloomfield
and
and Butterfield with Muddy and
the Stones as well.
And the Stones, absolutely.
Well, the Yardbirds with Howlin' Wolf, right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
But it was well, here you go. Did those blues albums affect your decision making and to reach out to Flatt and Scruggs?
There was a blues album connection, but more in the concept.
In the concept. That's what I meant. Yeah.
And that was Bill McEwen. There's a record called, I believe it's called Down South Summit Meeting. And it's Big Bill Brunzi. I think maybe Lightning Hopkins is on the record. There were 2 or 3 artists. And there was a lot of banter back and forth during the record. And it was clearly you got to be a fly on the wall. You got to be sitting there in the studio with those guys.
Like the third album in the set, of your set.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, all throughout, there's so much time.
Absolutely.
And that's part of the genius of Bill McEwen. I mean, Bill is John's older brother, who was our manager and record producer at the time.
Yeah.
The whole kernel for this thing started when Earl Scruggs came to a show of ours in 1970 at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. And his boys were fans of our band, and Earl really liked the harmonies and the harmonica, but really was drawn to the banjo and John's 5-string playing. He complimented John and said, you you played Randy Lynn Rag the way I intended it to be played.
Whoa!
Which was pretty great.
Yeah.
So we spent a couple hours with those guys after the show, and Earl brought Randy and Gary and Steve and his sons and his wife Louise with him as well.
Wow.
And it was like a family reunion with a family we'd never met. It was great.
Except you're a bunch of California-born hippies, and
yeah, but I got to tell you, Earl Scruggs he'd already hung out with the Byrds at that point, and Bob Dylan. He was like he was a super open-minded, forward-thinking cat. Here he was like he was taking part in like the protest against the Vietnam War.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, and he caught a lot of crap for it too. I got to tell you, but he was like he was a man of conviction, and when he wasn't going to let all the talk about them damn hippie long hair people get in his way. I mean, his boys look like us. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and Doc Watson was a similar kind of personality. So at the end of that initial meeting with Earl, he on his way out the door, he mentioned that if I'd love to do some recording with you guys sometime. Well, a few months later, Bill McEwen
you guys are based in Colorado at this point, is that right?
At this point, we've just moved to Colorado, yeah. Okay. And a few months later, Bill McEwen called each of us and said, "I've got this idea," because he referenced the fact that Earl wanted to record with us. He says, "Let's do a record that has all these greats, the people that you guys cut your teeth on, the music that was like your touchstones as kids, So he said, "Let's get Doc. Let's get we got Earl. Let's get Doc. Let's I shouldn't say we got Earl because John and I went to see the Earl Scruggs Review play in Boulder, Colorado, and John asked Earl if he'd like to take part in this record, and Earl said, "Well, I'd be proud to." So, boom, got Earl.
It's like opening a zipper from there.
Yeah. Well, after that, we had Earl and John using that as a calling card. John said to Doc Watson a week later, same club, and the same thing, the same generational thing.
Sure.
Because Doc's son Merle was a fan of our bands, and that really helped. So we got Doc and Earl, and then the list just grew. We knew Merle Travis already, and he agreed to come. He was, I don't remember if he was living in Nashville or if he was still in California, but he said he'd love to pick with us, and the whole thing kind of grew from there.
Well, how do you get Maybelle Carter?
Well, Earl Scruggs.
Yeah.
I mean, Earl Scruggs brought Maybelle Carter in. He brought.
And she's of a completely different generation.
Well, yeah, but Flatt and Scruggs did a great album of Carter family songs.
Sure.
If you're a fan, if you go deep, Earl was a great sort of Carter style guitarist as well. And they were family friends. I mean, Randy and Gary grew up around the Carters, and then the Cashes later on as well. So, that all happened. And I should point out also that John and Bill were big Jimmy Martin fans.
Right.
And when Bill Monroe, who was the only guy that actually turned us down for this project. Yeah.
I was going to ask whether he was invited.
He didn't want to. He didn't think his fans would understand him playing with a bunch of hippies, essentially.
So there was some of that still around, that kind of hippie prejudice.
Yeah, there's some funny. They got a funny phrase for it. I think they call them grass holes.
Deserve it.
That's the folks that that are just don't want to know about anything sort of progressive or newgrass. I get it. Listen, I love the traditional stuff, and to be fair, I'm digressing a little, but all the really brilliant bluegrass musicians that I've had the great pleasure of calling friends, like Jerry Douglas and Sam Bush and Bela Fleck, all those guys can play you note for note everything that set the standard back in the 40s and the 50s.
Sure.
That Flatt and Scruggs and Jim and Jesse and Jimmy Martin, came with, and Bill Monroe.
Yeah.
So that's a sidebar. But it was sad though because we love Bill Monroe's music to the day he dies. I still listen to it. But we had Jimmy Martin and Vassar Clemens, who had both played with Monroe as head Earl Scruggs.
Yeah.
So we got this crew of people together. A late holdout was Roy Acuff, who didn't really get it. He kind of looked at us and the book and cover thing, judging the book by its cover.
Yeah.
He kind of looked at us and thought, well, I don't know. And then he came in the studio after we'd recorded our session with Merle Travis, and we played him a track, and he said, well, that ain't nothing but country. I'll be here tomorrow.
All right. That ain't nothing but country.
So we cut our sides with him and Pete Oswald Kirby on dobro, great dobro player as well. It was so much fun, man. That record was cut in 6 days.
And there was no ice breaking. It was just everything felt natural.
No, nobody was. It was all so easy. And Maybelle Carter was a particularly calming, angelic sort of influence in the studio. So great, so cool to be sitting there. I mean, when I was a kid, way before the Dirt Band started, when I was still in high school, I had a Pete Seeger guitar instructional LP and
Yeah.
And Wildwood Flower was one of the songs that I learned how to play. Pete showing me how to do the hammer-ons the way, my friend Pete Seeger on the record playing it the way Maybelle did.
Yeah, and there you are.
So there we were. There we were in the studio, and just as a guitar, as a musician. We're in the studio with Maybelle Carter, who invented Carter-style guitar.
Sure.
There with Merle Travis, who invented Travis picking.
Yeah.
Earl Scruggs with a three-finger Scruggs-style banjo. Doc Watson, they didn't call it Doc style, but everybody knew who really, set the bar for flat picking acoustic guitar playing.
All the names came later.
Oh man, it was just like Mount Rushmore. and we're a bunch of guys just out of our teens going, this is fun, And then to find out later that maybe this got people, maybe broaden the scope of Vassar's career or Jimmy Martin or Doc's, made us really happy. That was a really, really cool thing. So,
well, everybody, people like me just started hunting out their records,
I appreciate that.
And it was so important. And then you got guys like Garcia going down and doing Pistol Packin' Mama, and so that's what you guys did was vital and so important. But who the hell let you do it in 3 records? I mean, that was unheard. It wasn't unheard of. I mean, a Beatle could do. Yeah, a Beatle could do it. But the Woodstock could do it. But
yeah, Bill McEwen. I think we caught those guys just as the wave was cresting for Mr. Bojangles. So we had a top 10 song. We're on TV everywhere, on the radio everywhere, and he was a great salesman. His pitch was, I'm going to put together this beautiful package, which he did, which he designed with Dean Torrance, who is Dean of Jan and Dean, by the way.
Sure.
And who's a great art designer as well. So he and Dean got together and put that beautiful, Bill took all those photographs, put that great package together, and 33 tracks on that record, 10 apiece.
Wow.
Or 11 apiece. Yeah, it hangs really well too. I take it out and listen to it. I make a point of listening in a circle every once in a while because even though I was there, it's like, that's a great document.
You don't feel bad about the Confederate flag?
Not at all.
Not at all.
It was 17 years later before we did a second one.
Yeah.
And another 13 after that before we did the third volume. And all 3 of those things were really fun. But of course, the first one I think was.
Well, to get recognized by the Grammys and keep getting recognized by the Grammys, that's your peers giving you shout-outs on how important those records were. So there you go.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm going to let you go, and it's just been a pleasure talking to you, Jeff.
And talking to you, man. We look forward to seeing you guys.
Yeah.
We're real excited to bring, bring this crew up there. to Ontario, have some fun, and
I'm not sure if the awareness is out there enough right now, but that's what I'm here to try and help. So.
Well, I appreciate that a lot, man.
And I'll be there for sure.
Mighty fine. Good talking to you, Graham.
Take care.
man.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day. Bye.